My name is Nick Seralto. I'm professor of guitar here at the Southern Miss School of Music, and I'm delighted that you have all been here to come, you've all decided to come to this performance tonight. It's the holiday season here in the Deep South, and we know that because it's been about 48 hours since Thanksgiving. We have had a number of musical performances this week here in the School of Music. On the coast, just this past Sunday, there was the Holiday Peppermint Pops on our coastal campus, where I wish the School of Music lived. We have tomorrow night the Holiday Spectacular at Main Street Baptist Church, where you will be presented with wonderful holiday music performed by a full orchestra and about 40,000 singers. And tonight we will have another holiday-inspired event, but this will be a little bit something different than what you have experienced thus far. This one's just a little bit different. We're going to hear some wonderful holiday music, but instead of just the music expertly played, you'll hear about the people behind the music. And I think their stories will prove to be fascinating and unexpected. This evening has been made possible by a few people and programs. I would like to first thank the Partners for the Arts, a wonderful arts organization on campus that really turns the arts alive here, and we are very grateful for their support. I'd also like to thank the Southern Miss School of Music Jazz Studies program for their support in hosting Dr. Curtis in his residency this week. I'd also like to thank Southern Miss guitar alum and professor at Jones College, Dr. Michael Boyd, for graciously providing some of his musical equipment for tonight. And finally, I'd like to thank the students of the Southern Miss Guitar Studio for helping to set up the stage. Thank you very much for your help as well. I'm happy to present Dr. Peter Curtis, professor of music at Riverside City College. He's a brilliant musician and is sure to delight. I am very lucky to call him a friend and colleague. You are all very lucky to be able to hear his music, perhaps buy his CDs after the show. And that said, and without further ado, I'd like to present Peter Curtis.
Hello. All right, thanks very much. So that, as you all know, was Walking in a Winter Wonderland. And I've got a list here of the songs that I'm going to do tonight in chronological order. Walking in Winter Wonderland, as you can see, was written in 1934 with music by Felix Bernard and lyrics by Richard Smith. Hopefully, I have underlined the names of the Jewish composers because the theme of the concert is Christmas music by Jewish people. So that one was one in which the music, where it was a collaboration where the lyricist was not Jewish, but the composer was. I must admit that I felt a little odd making a list of Jewish people for historical reasons. It seemed creepy. But regardless, I'm doing it with my heart in the right place. To talk about this music and the historical phenomenon of Jewish people writing Christmas music and to look at it in a cultural context, and I'm going to get into all of that as we go. But first, I just wanted to say a little bit about Winter Wonderland. As I mentioned, the music was written by Felix Bernard, who was a vaudeville pianist. He wrote music for shows, was a band leader, and worked with a number of Jewish artists, Al Jolson, Eddie Cantor, and Sophie Tucker. And Richard Smith was a songwriter as well as a theater manager. When I told people that I was working on this project of Christmas music by Jewish people, inevitably people would say, oh, like Irving Berlin, because I guess that's sort of the most iconic Christmas song written by a Jewish person is his famous White Christmas. So the Bing Crosby version is the world's best-selling single, as you can see, with 100 million copies sold worldwide. It was used in the film Holiday Inn and won the Oscar for Best Original Song, and supposedly was written in the summer in Beverly Hills. He really was dreaming of a White Christmas. In any case, I'm going to switch guitars here. So Irving Berlin, thank you very much. Irving Berlin was born Israel Balin, lived from 1888 to 1989. He was born in what is now Belarus, which actually was where my grandfather was born as well, who was part of the same wave of Jewish immigration to America, or in my grandfather's case, to Canada. Between the 1880s and the 1920s, there was a huge wave of immigration, which is when the majority of these songwriters' parents or they came to the United States. Anyway, but Irving Berlin's father was a cantor. He arrived here at age 5, was working at age 18, left school at 13. He was a singing paper boy, then a saloon singer, and then a singing waiter in Chinatown. He published his first song in 1907, and he was hired by Harry von Tilzer, who is also a Jewish songwriter, born Aaron Gabinski. And Aaron Gabinski also is or Harry von Tilzer was also a important American songwriter in that he wrote After the Ball, which was one of the first hugely selling pieces of sheet music of the Tin Pan Alley era. Irving Berlin wrote a number of tunes that reflected the ethnic diversity of New York in his period, well, the ethnic diversity of New York today as well, including Marie from Sunny Italy, his famous Alexander's Ragtime Band, and there are other songs too. There are a number of them that are really about different ethnicities. For instance, he has a song called Yiddle on Your Fiddle, Play Some Ragtime. He wrote 1,500 songs, 20 Broadway shows, Hollywood films. Obviously hugely influential person. Here are a few of his songs, Cheek to Cheek, which you've all heard that. Blue Skies. And one thing that's interesting about Blue Skies, there's kind of a musical giveaway of his Jewish heritage in the bridge. That melody, never saw the sun shining so bright. You wouldn't really expect a song with lyrics about the sun shining so bright to have such a sinuous minor melody. Which represents, I think, the probably cantorial music with which he grew up. So a number of his songs, including God Bless America. And it's interesting that these songwriters are often considered to be the songwriters who wrote what is frequently referred to as the Great American Songbook. Personally, I'm not crazy about the term Great American Songbook because I think it leaves out a lot of music which I feel is also part of the American Songbook. But when people talk about the Great American Songbook, usually they're talking about Tin Pan Alley era music from the 20s through the 50s, with standards and jazz standards, musical theater numbers, and an overwhelming number of the songwriters of that repertoire, for reasons that I'll discuss in a bit, were Jewish. And among the music that they wrote was Christmas music. The next one I'd like to do is I'll Be Home for Christmas. Music by Walter Kent, who was born Walter Kaufman. Lyrics by James Gannon. Walter Kaufman was Jewish, James Gannon was not. It was first recorded by Bing Crosby to honor soldiers overseas in World War II. And beautiful, beautiful tune. So, I'll Be Home for Christmas. Thank you. So from 1944 by Mel Torme, the great Mel Torme, with lyrics, the music was by Mel Torme and lyrics by both Mel Torme and Robert Wells, who was born Robert Levinson. Robert Levinson was a TV producer who worked with Dinah Shore and Shirley MacLaine, won a number of Emmys, as well as a songwriter and scriptwriter. And you probably, well, many of you know this as Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire, the Christmas song. So, from 1945, just 1 year later, Let It Snow, with lyrics by Sammy Cahn, born Samuel Cohen, and music by Jules Stein, one of the only, actually I think the only British person among the musicians whose music I'm playing tonight. So Sammy Cahn wrote the lyrics for Love and Marriage, All the Way, and won 4 Oscars. Jules Stein published 1,500 songs, did a lot of musical theater, including Gypsy, Funny Girl. Anyway, here's Let It Snow. Thank you. So I'm going to play Sleigh Ride, and then I'll talk a little bit about the composers and lyricists. Well, I guess I'll just say a little bit right now. So the gentleman on your left, wait, your right, is Leroy Anderson, who is a composer of light concert music, and he wrote the music. The lyrics were written by Mitchell Parrish, who was born Michael Hyman Pashalinski, and he is the guy to your left wearing the amazing ascot. I really wish I had the courage of my convictions to wear an ascot like that. Need a little more confidence. But, so, Mitchell Parrish, Michael Hyman Pashalinski was, it's really remarkable the number of classic American songs for which he wrote the lyrics, given the fact that his first language was Yiddish. Some of the songs which he wrote are, the lyrics for Stardust, Sophisticated Lady, Deep Purple, Stars Fell on Alabama. And, a lyric like Stardust, and now the purple dust of twilight time steals across the meadows of my heart. For somebody whose first language even for someone whose first language is English, I think it's a remarkable lyric. Is my microphone on? No?
No?
Good.
Turn your amp on.
It's a remarkable lyric. But given the fact that it's not his first language, it's all the more remarkable. In any case, in his words, giddy up, let's go. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I just want to talk a little bit about the phenomenon of Jewish people writing Christmas music. As I mentioned before, there was a huge amount of Jewish immigration to the United States between 1880 and 1920, largely, well, almost exclusively from Eastern Europe, which is where my grandparents came from. They ended up in Canada, which I like to refer to as the land next door to the land of opportunity. I actually didn't. I can't claim that that's an original line. It's from the Canadian author Mordechai Richler, who wrote a lot about the Canadian Jewish experience. If you haven't read any Mordechai Richler, I highly recommend. My favorite of his is Solomon Gursky Was Here. Beautiful book. But anyway, I digress. It's surely a sign of my encroaching madness. So let me return to the topic at hand. Great amount of Jewish immigration to the United States and Canada between 1880 and 1920. Still, a lot of doors were closed to Jewish people. Law firms, especially white shoe law firms, as they were called, did not hire Jewish attorneys. There were quotas at universities. There are a couple of books on the subject of quotas at Ivy League universities on the number of Jews that were allowed. But show business was pretty wide open. It wasn't, in the early 20th century, I don't think there was the same sense that we have now of show business people being kind of like royalty or demigods. Entertainers were still looked upon. They were appreciated, they were famous, but they weren't held in the same kind of high regard, and doors were open. The area that became known as Tin Pan Alley was part of the music publishing industry in New York City, and it was literally a street near Broadway where music publishers tried to sell their songs to vaudeville show performers. Songwriters tried to sell their songs to music publishers, and in all these buildings near Broadway were apparently the sounds of multiple pianos being played simultaneously, which sounded to the passerby apparently like tin pans being banged together, or so the story goes. Maybe it's apocryphal, but that's why it came to be called Tin Pan Alley. That style of music that comes from that, mainly from Broadway shows, and then early Hollywood movies, and basically most popular music in the United States from the 20s till about the advent of rock and roll in the 50s is dominated by Tin Pan Alley. So you've got composers like the Gershwins, Jerome Kern, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Rodgers and Hart. An overwhelming number of these songwriters were Jewish people who either one generation before or, in the case of Irving Berlin, came to the United States as a child. And either their parents came, their grandparents came, or usually their parents. But in the case of Irving Berlin, who's a bit older, came here as a child and broke into this area where there weren't barriers to them pursuing a career. What's interesting to me is that what's going on in a broader sense in American society at the time is the assimilation of Jewish people into mainstream American society. There was a big push. I know my grandfather, in his case it was not assimilating into American society, but assimilating into Canadian society. He would never say that he was born in Poland, even though he was. It was always that he was born in Canada. He wanted to be a Canadian. And that's a very common trope of that generation of immigrants, trying to assimilate, trying to not stand out. My last name, Curtis, was anglicized from the Russian Kurtosh. My grandfather's generation. Again, that drive to assimilate. So what's so fascinating to me is that what comes to be known as the Great American Songbook, what is often referred to as the Great American Songbook, which, as I mentioned, is not a term I'm crazy about, because it leaves out a lot. You know, Hank Williams isn't usually included in what people call the Great American Songbook, or Robert Johnson's not usually included in what people call the Great American Songbook. And in my opinion, if you're going to talk about the Great American Songbook, they should be, as well should be many, many others. But when people use that term, it's usually used to refer to the Tin Pan Alley repertoire of like the 20s through the 50s songs, like Somewhere Over the Rainbow and Someone to Watch Over Me and I Got Rhythm, and so many of these songs written by these Jewish songwriters. So what's fascinating is that this body of music that comes to be known as the Great American Songbook, rightly or wrongly, in my view wrongly, is written by people who are assimilating into American society at the same time as there are large numbers of their co-religionists or fellow people from their same ethnic group who are assimilating into American society. And musically, these songwriters, in assimilating, did so well that they created much of what we consider to be iconically American song. Okay, so Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. This is a fascinating story, in my opinion. So the song was written by Johnny Marks, but Johnny Marks's brother was Robert L. May. Oh, excuse me, brother-in-law was Robert L. May. They were both Jewish guys. Robert L. May was a copywriter for Montgomery Ward, and Montgomery Ward was doing a book giveaway at one Christmas season as a way of doing good public service. But they sort of realized that it would be cheaper for them to have one of their in-house copywriters, copywriter being someone who writes commercials, to write a booklet that they could give away rather than give away their own inventory of books. So Robert L. May wrote the story of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and that is the cover that was the booklet that Montgomery Ward was giving away. 10 years later, his brother-in-law writes the song Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, first recorded by Gene Autry, which becomes a #1 in 1949. Now, what's interesting to me about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer as a song, and the fact that it is written by a Jew, is we're all familiar with the stereotype of the Jewish nose being different. And, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, consider Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, ostracized from the broader reindeer community, not accepted because of the difference of his nose. But in the end, it is his nose, his difference, that saves the day. It could be a coincidence, but I doubt it. Anyway, here we go. So Johnny Marks, knew a good thing when he started it, and made a sort of cool cottage industry for himself out of writing Christmas songs. I don't know many of these songs. I Don't Want a Lot for Christmas. Well, that one's mine now. Run, Rudolph, Run. There you go. That's Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree is another one. Holly Jolly Christmas. I mean, he even went on to start his own publishing company, which was called St. Nicholas Music. So he really took the ball and ran with it. Okay, now, this looks like the law firm of Livingston and Evans, but in fact it is two songwriters. Jay Livingston, who was born Jacob Harold Levinson, with lyrics by Ray Evans. The song was first performed by Bob Hope and Marilyn Monroe in the Lemon Drop Kid. They met when they were undergrads at the University of Pennsylvania. Evans received his bachelor's from the Wharton School of Business there, and they went on to write a number of songs for films and won Academy Awards. Mona Lisa being one of the most famous, as well as Que Sera Sera. So this guitar is a guitar that one of Nick's colleagues very kindly loaned, as well as, this guitar is a guitar that he very kindly loaned to me to use, and it's a guitar which has what's called a B bender in it. So a B bender is I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the colleague, Dr. Ciraldo, what's his name? Dr. Michael Boyd. So Dr. Michael Boyd, thank you very much for the loan of the guitar. I really appreciate it. So a B-bender guitar is developed by Clarence White of the Byrds during their country and western incarnation, as well as their drummer, Gene Parsons. And the idea was to have a guitar that could imitate the sound of a pedal steel. So when one bends the neck down, the B string goes up a whole step. Yeah, so you can kind of imitate that pedal steel sound by doing things like this. Anyway, when I was working out this arrangement of Silver Bells, I kept kind of hearing the sound of a B-bender in my head. So naturally, I had to buy one. But I didn't want to schlep it from California, so Dr. Michael Boyd was very kind to let me borrow it. So anyway, without further ado, here's Silver Bells played on B-bender guitar. very much. So, Santa Baby, this is the only song that I'm going to play tonight that was written or co-written by a woman, Philip Springer and Joan Javits. As in many fields, women were underrepresented amongst Tin Pan Alley era composers, which luckily there's been progress with more women composers in the music industry, but as was the case, in many areas in the 20th century, that women were underrepresented. But, and this repertoire is no exception. But Joan Javits did co-write this with Philip Springer, and they were asked by music publishers to write a Christmas song for Eartha Kitt, who many of you will know as Catwoman. And Eartha Kitt was already famous as being this very ribald, suggestive performer. And so they weren't really sure how that fits with Christmas, but Santa Baby was what they came up with. Here's Philip Springer, working it in his hat. He wrote music for Gunsmoke, Mannix, and Medical Center TV shows, all. And here's Joan Javits in her fabulous kitchen. I know, isn't she? And I wish I could share it with you. That's how the yodel was born, but it doesn't really fit this program. But interestingly, she was the niece of Jacob K. Javits, who was a U.S. senator. In any case, here we go, Santa Baby. Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree was written by Johnny Marks, who also wrote Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The original version sold 25 million copies as performed by Brenda Lee. She was 13 when she recorded it. One thing that's interesting to me for guitar nerds, and interesting for me and for other guitar nerds out there, on the original recording, Hank Garland is playing guitar. Hank Garland was a Nashville session guitarist who went on to be a really fine jazz guitarist. His first album, Jazz Winds from a New Direction, features the very young Gary Burton on it. I think he was 17 when he played on that album. Sadly, Hank Garland died way too young, but an incredible national session guitarist who sort of crossed over and became a jazz guitarist. Anyway, speaking of guitar, here's Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree. All right, so this is, we're getting close to the end. It's The Most Wonderful Time of the Year by Edward Pola, who was born Sidney Edward Polachek, and George Weil, born Bernard Weissman, first recorded for the Andy Williams Christmas album, and this is from 1963. Edward Pola was an actor, radio and TV producer and songwriter, scored the movie Harmony Heaven, and co-wrote a few other songs with George Weil, including I Love the Way You Say Goodnight. George Weil was a musical director for a number of TV shows, The Andy Williams Show, The John Denver Show, The Muppets, and he co-wrote the theme to Gilligan's Island, which, for that alone, I salute him. Composed over 400 songs. Speaking of Gilligan's Island, I really feel like the lyrics to that song are really quite brilliant. Especially there's that one line, if not for the courage of the fearless crew, the minnow would be lost. Which, just in terms of the emphasis being on the right syllable and the rhythmic complexity of that phrase, is quite artful. But anyway, I digress again. Yet another sign of my encroaching madness. So here's The Most Wonderful Time of the Year. very much. So, Christmas Time is Here has music by Vince Guaraldi, who is not Jewish, but lyrics by Lee Mendelson, who most certainly was. So Lee Mendelson was a television producer, and he got the gig to put together a, well, let me backtrack a little bit. So this was, I'll get to that in a second. This was originally an instrumental, and then Mendelson decided he needed lyrics for it, claimed that he wrote it in 5 to 10 minutes. Lee Mendelson was born in San Francisco, graduated from Stanford as an English major, worked in TV at KPIX in San Francisco, and he did a documentary called A Man Called Mays about Willie Mays. And after doing that documentary, he was quoted as saying that after having done a documentary about the world's best baseball player, he should do a documentary about the world's worst baseball player, Charlie Brown. And so he did a documentary about Charles Schultz, who was the artist and writer of Peanuts, called A Boy Named Charlie Brown. But it was never aired. But it started a 30-year collaboration between Schultz and Mendelson. Coca-Cola asked him to do a Christmas special. He enlisted Schultz. The Peanuts Christmas special was born. Mendelson was the one who hired Vince Guaraldi to write the music. He heard the song Cast Your Fate to the Wind, which was played on San Francisco radio while he was driving over the Golden Gate Bridge. Vince Guaraldi was a Bay Area jazz musician, and upon hearing that song, he decided to hire him to write the music for the Peanuts Christmas special. So anyway, here I'm going to use the B-bender again, and here's Christmas Time is Here. All right, thank you very, very much. So I would just like to thank Dr. Michael Boyd for the loan of this guitar. And I would especially like to thank my old dear friend, Dr. Nicholas Seraldo, and his wife, Rachel Taratute Seraldo, for inviting me to come and play here for you and hosting me so kindly at their home. It's been wonderful. I've known Nick since the 90s, and when we were both students together at Indiana University. And it's wonderful to see. He was an incredible young guitarist when I met him, and it's wonderful to see the great career and the great life that he's built, and the beautiful community that he's part of here. And that refers to all of you. So thank you all for being here and being part of this concert tonight. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you being here. So the last song I'm going to do is my small addition to the corpus of Christmas songs written by Jewish people. This is a song that I wrote for my now wife before we were married. And it was the first holiday we spent together. She is not Jewish, though she's converting apparently. But the first holiday we spent together, I wrote this song for her called Christmas with Your Jewish Boyfriend. And, I could change it to Christmas with Your Jewish Husband now that we're married, but husband is a lot harder to rhyme than boyfriend. And also the boyfriend, the emphasis is on the right syllable in terms of the phrase, whereas husband just doesn't work. And I appreciate the emphasis being on the right syllable, as I mentioned before with my discussion of the lyrics to Gilligan's Island. But anyway, this song and all the music that I've played tonight is on my same CD, this CD, which I'd be happy to sell. I also have a couple of other CDs which I'd be happy to sell to anybody who's interested. My most recent one is called Pete's Pandemic Playlist, which is all songs that the pandemic made me think of, including Staying Alive, In the Air Tonight, I Will Survive. All played on solo guitar, except for I did one song with a colleague of mine from Riverside City College. We did a duet recorded during the height of lockdown when we were both in our own homes. I recorded my part and then he did his. And we did The Nearness of You when we were not at all near each other. Anyway, so thank you again for being such a great audience, and thanks again to Dr. Seraldo and Rachel Taratute Seraldo for having me out, and to Lucas Seraldo for being such a good sport and sharing his bathroom with me. And this is my little Christmas song. I don't go to church, but then nor do you. On Christmas Day, I like to eat mooshu. You'll drive those girls on J-Date straight round the bend when you spend Christmas with your Jewish boyfriend. Christmas with your Jewish boyfriend. My people wrote so many Christmas songs. So come on, baby, we can get along. The foes of intermarriage you will surely offend when you spend Christmas with your Jewish boyfriend. Christmas with your Jewish boyfriend. You've got 12 days, I've got 8 nights. I light the menorah, you have Christmas lights. Let's share our tradition and not have a fight. Who cares who's wrong if our love is right? Now mistletoe and eggnog are just fine. With dreidels and with gelt they intertwine. Interfaith dialogue is surely on the mend Besides, it's one less Christmas card that you'll have to send. As long as we are living, let's hope there is no end to Christmas with your Jewish boyfriend. Christmas with your Jewish boyfriend. Thank you.
Did I pick up the guitar too fast?
All right, just to close up, I'll just play blues. So, because it's the most American of music, and we're in Mississippi, the birthplace of the blues. So this is C Jam Blues. Very much. Thank you so much again for having me. Thank you to Dr. Serraldo and Rachel Parati Serraldo. Thank you to for loaning me this guitar, and thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate it. I've got some CDs, and if you'd like, I can meet you in the lobby if anybody's interested in buying one. Thanks very much.